My wife secretly planned our divorce for months, but her search history exposed a calculated betrayal that let me turn the tables and win everything. Before heading to the office, what I discovered in the search history would change everything between us forever. The first search hit me like a punch to the gut: how to get everything in divorce settlement. But that was just the beginning. The rabbit hole went deeper than I could have imagined. Search after search revealed a calculated plan that had been brewing for months: how to hide assets before divorce, best divorce lawyers for women, how to prove emotional abuse in court, and the one that made my blood run cold: how to make husband look bad in divorce proceedings. I sat there staring at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. This wasn't some random curiosity or research for a friend. The timestamps showed these searches had been happening almost daily for the past 6 weeks. My wife had been systematically researching how to destroy me financially and legally, all while kissing me goodbye every morning and asking about my day every evening. The most recent search was from yesterday evening, right after we had watched a movie together on the couch. While I was brushing my teeth, she was apparently researching how to get alimony from high-earning spouse and community property laws and divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was using the very computer I had bought for our anniversary to plan my financial ruin. I scrolled through weeks of search history, each entry painting a clearer picture of her intentions. She had researched everything from how to get custody of pets in divorce to how to keep house in divorce settlement. She had even looked up signs husband is cheating and how to gather evidence of infidelity, despite knowing full well I had never been unfaithful. My hands were shaking as I realized the scope of her deception. This wasn't a woman having doubts about our marriage, or even someone considering divorce as a last resort. This was someone who had already made up her mind and was now strategically planning to take me for everything I was worth. The search for how to make divorce look like husband's fault hit particularly hard. I thought about all the recent arguments she had been starting over trivial things, all the times she had been documenting my responses with her phone nearby. Now it all made sense. She had been building a case against me, creating evidence of my supposed unreasonable behavior. I noticed she had even researched how to get temporary alimony during divorce proceedings and emergency protective orders in divorce. The woman who had been sleeping next to me every night was researching how to potentially get me removed from my own home with false allegations. But what really sealed it was finding the bookmarked page, top 10 most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state. She had not only researched them, but had apparently contacted several based on the email confirmations I found in our shared account that she had apparently forgotten to delete. The worst part wasn't even the financial aspect. It was the realization that every loving gesture, every intimate moment, every future plan we had discussed over the past 2 months had been completely fake on her part. She had been playing a role, keeping me comfortable and unsuspecting while she meticulously planned my destruction. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The woman I had married, the woman I had built a life with, had been systematically preparing to betray me in the most devastating way possible, but she had made one crucial mistake in her planning. She had underestimated me completely. While she was busy researching how to take everything from me, she had failed to consider that I might discover her plans. And now that I knew exactly what she was planning, I had something she didn't: the element of surprise and the advantage of preparation. I finished my coffee and headed to work, my mind already racing with possibilities. If she wanted to play games, I would show her what a real strategic mind could accomplish. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with and plan my response accordingly. The game had begun, and she had just shown me all her cards without realizing it. The next few days required every ounce of self-control I possessed. I had to act completely normal while conducting my own investigation into what my wife had been planning. Every morning greeting, every casual dinner conversation, every goodnight kiss felt like a performance. But I kept my expression neutral and my behavior unchanged. I started by examining our joint bank accounts more carefully than I ever had before. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 3 months, there had been a pattern of unusual withdrawals and transfers that I had previously attributed to regular expenses. But now, with the context of her divorce research, everything looked different. She had been systematically moving money from our joint savings into her personal checking account. Small amounts at first, $200 or $300 here and there, but the amounts had been increasing. Last week alone, she had transferred over $2,000, claiming it was for household expenses when I had glanced at the statement. I printed out 6 months of bank statements and highlighted every suspicious transaction. The pattern was clear. She had been slowly draining our joint resources while I remained completely oblivious. The timing aligned perfectly with when her divorce research had begun. But the financial discoveries were just the beginning. I began paying closer attention to her daily routines and noticed things that had previously escaped my attention. She was taking her phone with her everywhere now, even to the bathroom. She had changed her passcode, something she claimed was for security reasons after reading about identity theft. Her work schedule had also become mysteriously flexible. She was having more lunch meetings and client consultations that seemed to run long. When I had casually asked about these new responsibilities, she had become defensive and changed the subject quickly. I decided to take a sick day and conduct a more thorough investigation. After she left for work, I went through our home office systematically. Hidden in a folder labeled Recipe Collection, I found printed copies of articles about divorce proceedings, property division laws, and a handwritten list of our major assets with estimated values. The list was comprehensive and chilling. She had itemized everything from our car values to my retirement accounts, even including my collection of vintage tools that my father had left me. Next to each item, she had written notes like community property or separate property research needed. What really caught my attention was a business card paperclip to the back of the list. It was from a private investigator specializing in matrimonial investigations. The card had a phone number written on the back in her handwriting along with a date from 2 weeks ago. I called the number from my work phone during lunch, pretending to be interested in their services. The receptionist confirmed they had spoken with someone matching my wife's description about conducting a discreet investigation into a spouse's finances and potential infidelity. They had apparently provided her with a quote for their services. That evening, I watched her more carefully during dinner. She was asking leading questions about my work, my CO workers, and my schedule in ways that seemed casual but felt calculated. When I mentioned having to work late next week, she seemed almost pleased, asking specific questions about which days and times. I began documenting everything, every suspicious transaction, every unusual behavior, every inconsistency in her stories. I photographed the hidden documents and made copies of everything I found. If she was building a case against me, I would build a much stronger case documenting her deception. The following day, I made my own appointment with a divorce attorney, not to file for divorce, but to understand exactly what I was facing and what options I had. The consultation was enlightening and terrifying in equal measure. The attorney explained that in our state, financial misconduct during marriage, including hiding assets or dissipating marital property, could significantly impact divorce settlements. He also noted that documented evidence of planning and deception could be crucial in court proceedings. More importantly, he explained that there were legal steps I could take to protect myself if I suspected my spouse was planning to file for divorce. I could secure our joint accounts, document all marital assets, and even file protective orders if necessary. I left that meeting with a clear action plan and a much better understanding of the legal landscape. My wife thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she was wrong. I was just playing a different game entirely. That night, as she kissed me goodnight and told me she loved me, I realized that this was probably the last time I would feel any emotional connection to those words. Tomorrow I would begin implementing my own strategy. The student was about to become the teacher. The next phase required me to become an actor in my own life. Every morning I would wake up, kiss my wife goodbye, and head to work while secretly implementing a strategy that would protect everything I had worked for. The irony wasn't lost on me that while she was researching how to destroy me, I was quietly building an impenetrable defense. My first move was to secure our joint accounts legally. I contacted our bank and requested that any withdrawals over $500 require both signatures. I presented this to my wife as a security measure after hearing about friends who had their accounts compromised. She seemed nervous about the change, but couldn't object without revealing her true intentions. I also began redirecting my direct deposit. Instead of everything going into our joint account, I split it so that only my usual contribution for household expenses went there, while the rest went into a separate account she didn't know about. This wasn't hiding money illegally, it was protecting my earnings from further unauthorized transfers. The most crucial step was documenting everything systematically. I installed a small security camera in our home office, legally placed on our own property, that would record anyone accessing our financial documents. I also began photographing the contents of her purse and briefcase when she left them unattended, discovering business cards from 3 different divorce attorneys. Her behavior became increasingly suspicious as the days passed. She would receive phone calls that she would answer in private, claiming they were from her sister or work colleagues. But when I casually mentioned her sister during one of our conversations, it became clear they hadn't spoken in weeks. I also noticed she was becoming more argumentative, seemingly trying to provoke me into reactions that she could document. During one dinner, she started a heated argument about household chores, and I spotted her phone position to record our conversation. Instead of taking the bait, I responded calmly and reasonably, which seemed to frustrate her plans. One evening, I discovered she had been photographing our valuables. The timestamps on her phone showed she had been systematically documenting every piece of expensive equipment, jewelry, and artwork in our home. She was building a comprehensive inventory for the divorce proceedings. But her biggest mistake was underestimating my technical skills. I had set up our home network years ago, which meant I had administrative access to everything. I could see every website she visited, every email she sent, and every document she accessed. Her digital footprint was painting a complete picture of her strategy. She had been in contact with a forensic accountant who specialized in finding hidden assets in divorce cases. The email chain revealed she was planning to have our finances investigated, convinced that I must be hiding money somewhere. The irony was that until she started her scheme, I had been completely transparent about our finances. I used this knowledge to my advantage. When she mentioned needing money for a work conference, I knew from her emails that she was actually planning to use it for a retainer fee for her divorce attorney. I told her the joint account was temporarily restricted due to the bank's security measures, forcing her to use her own funds. The most satisfying discovery came when I found her practice conversations. She had been rehearsing emotional speeches about how unhappy she was in our marriage, practicing different ways to present herself as the victim. She had even researched how to cry on command and appear vulnerable in court. During this time, I began consulting with my own legal team more regularly. They helped me understand exactly what constituted marital property versus separate property and how to legally protect assets that were mine before the marriage or inherited from my family. I also started building relationships with key witnesses. I began having regular coffee meetings with neighbors and mutual friends, not to gossip about my wife, but to establish my character and normal behavior patterns. If she tried to paint me as abusive or unstable, I would have plenty of people who could testify to the contrary. Her research had revealed that she was planning to file for divorce right after our upcoming anniversary. The timing was strategic. She believed it would make her appear more sympathetic to have endured another year of unhappiness. But knowing her timeline gave me the advantage of preparation. I began moving my personal belongings, particularly items with sentimental value, to a secure location. Not the obvious things that would be noticed, but photographs, documents, and small personal items that I couldn't bear to lose in a vindictive property division. The most challenging part was maintaining the facade of normality. Every conversation felt like a chess match where I had to appear unaware of her strategy while carefully maneuvering my own pieces into position. When she suggested we should talk about our future soon, I knew she was preparing to spring her trap, but I had news for her. While she had been researching how to take everything in a divorce, I had been preparing to ensure she got exactly what she deserved, nothing more and nothing less. Her months of deception were about to meet their match in strategic preparation and legal precision. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The confrontation came on a Friday evening, exactly 3 weeks after our anniversary, just as her research had suggested. She had prepared what she clearly thought would be a devastating surprise attack. I was in the living room when she walked in with a folder in her hands and an expression that mixed fake sadness with poorly concealed excitement. "We need to talk," she said, sitting across from me with the folder placed deliberately on the coffee table between us. "I've been thinking about our marriage, and I think we need to consider a separation." I looked up from my book, maintaining the same calm expression I had perfected over the past months. "Really? This seems sudden." She launched into her rehearsed speech about how she had been unhappy for so long and how we had grown apart. Every word sounded practiced, like she was reading from a script, which, based on the notes I had found, she essentially was. "I've already consulted with an attorney," she continued, her voice taking on a more businesslike tone. "I think we can handle this amicably if we're both reasonable about the division of assets." That was my cue. I closed my book and leaned back in my chair. "You mean the attorney you contacted 6 weeks ago, or one of the other 3 you've been shopping around with?" The color drained from her face. For the first time in months, her expression was completely genuine, pure shock mixed with growing panic. "I know about the private investigator too," I continued conversationally. and the forensic accountant, and the $15,000 you VE transferred from our joint savings over the past 3 months. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my own folder, much thicker than hers. I also know about your research into making false abuse allegations, your attempts to document my behavior for court, and your plan to claim I was hiding assets. I placed the folder on the table next to hers. You've been very thorough in your preparation, almost as thorough as I've been in documenting your preparation. Her hands were shaking now as she reached for her folder. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, I corrected. Everything I've done has been completely legal. Unlike your attempts to secretly drain our joint accounts and build a fraudulent case against me. I opened my folder and showed her the first document. This is a record of every unauthorized transfer you've made from our joint savings, each one time-stamped and documented. This next one is a transcript of your conversation with the private investigator where you discussed fabricating evidence of my alleged infidelity. She was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. How did you? The same way you found out about divorce law, I replied. Research. Except I researched how to protect myself from exactly what you were planning to do to me. I pulled out another set of documents. These are financial records showing that, contrary to your assumptions, I haven't been hiding any assets. Everything I earn goes to our household or legitimate savings. But these records also show your systematic attempts to hide your own financial misconduct. Her lawyer persona was crumbling rapidly. You don't understand. I just wanted to be prepared, in case... In case of what? In case you decided to destroy me financially and legally? I leaned forward slightly. You weren't preparing for divorce. You were preparing for war, and you made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't fight back. I showed her the next document. This is a sworn affidavit from our neighbor, documenting your visits from the private investigator. And this one is from your sister, who was very interested to know why you told the investigator that you hadn't spoken to her in months when you call her twice a week. She was now visibly shaking. What do you want? I want exactly what you claim to want. A fair divorce. I pulled out the final document. These are the actual divorce papers filed this morning, based on irreconcilable differences, with a complete accounting of all marital assets and a clear record of your financial misconduct. Her eyes widened as she realized what this meant. You're divorcing me? I'm beating you to it, I said simply. By about 3 weeks, according to your original timeline. She scrambled to open her own folder, pulling out papers that suddenly looked pathetic compared to the comprehensive documentation I had prepared. But I have... You have a bunch of research about divorce law and some notes about our assets, I interrupted. I have months of documented evidence of your deception, financial misconduct, and attempts to build a fraudulent case against me. Which file do you think will be more impressive in court? The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. All her careful planning, all her strategic research, all her months of preparation had been completely outmaneuvered by someone who had simply been more thorough and more patient. My attorney will be in touch with yours, I continued, standing up, assuming you still want to proceed with the same lawyer you've been consulting with behind my back for the past month and a half. She looked up at me with desperation, replacing her earlier confidence. We can work this out. We don't have to go through with this. I looked down at her with genuine pity. You're right. We didn't have to go through with this. But you made that choice 6 weeks ago when you decided to research how to destroy me instead of how to fix our marriage. I picked up my folder and headed toward the door. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. My attorney will contact you about arrangements for collecting my belongings. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. You wanted to know how to get everything in divorce. You should have researched how to keep everything in marriage instead. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. The legal proceedings that followed were a masterclass in preparation versus desperation. While my wife scrambled to build a defense against charges she hadn't seen coming, I watched my months of careful documentation pay off in ways that exceeded even my expectations. Her attorney, the aggressive specialist she had researched so carefully, found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending the indefensible. During our first mediation session, he arrived with a thick folder and a confident demeanor that lasted exactly 15 minutes. My client has concerns about the sudden nature of these proceedings, he began, clearly trying to paint me as the aggressor. She feels ambushed by this filing and questions the motives behind the timing. My attorney simply smiled and opened our file. Your client has been planning this divorce for over 2 months. We have documented evidence of her consultations with multiple attorneys, her research into divorce strategies, and her systematic attempts to manipulate the marital finances. The look on her lawyer's face when he saw the evidence was priceless. Email printouts, bank records, timestamps, witness statements, and even screenshots of her search history laid out in chronological order. It told a story that was impossible to deny or spin. Furthermore, my attorney continued, "Your client hired a private investigator to build a case against my client based on fabricated evidence. We have recordings of those conversations as well." I watched my wife sink lower in her chair as her attorney flipped through page after page of documented proof. Her master plan was unraveling in real time, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it. The financial misconduct allegations hit particularly hard. Her systematic draining of our joint accounts, which she had thought was clever, now looked like exactly what it was: theft. The $15,000 she had transferred to her personal account would need to be returned with interest. But the real damage came when my attorney presented the evidence of her consultation with the forensic accountant. The emails revealed that she had been planning to accuse me of hiding assets worth over $100,000, money that simply didn't exist. This wasn't just divorce strategy, it was potential fraud. "My client is prepared to file criminal charges for financial misconduct if necessary," my attorney stated calmly. "However, we're willing to proceed with the divorce settlement, as filed, if your client agrees to the terms immediately." Her lawyer requested a private consultation with his client. I could hear raised voices through the conference room wall as he explained exactly how bad her situation had become. When they returned, her attitude had completely changed. Gone was the confident woman who had walked into my living room with her folder of demands. In her place sat someone who looked like she was attending her own funeral. Her lawyer's confident demeanor had also evaporated, replaced by the resigned expression of someone trying to minimize damage. "We're prepared to accept the settlement as proposed," he said quietly. My attorney looked at me, and I nodded. The settlement was exactly what I had planned, a fair division of actual marital assets, with her keeping what was legitimately hers, and me keeping what was legitimately mine. No alimony, no inflated demands, no fraudulent claims, just honest accounting. But there was one additional element that made the victory complete. Because of her financial misconduct, she would be responsible for her own legal fees as well as reimbursing me for the costs of investigating her deception. The aggressive attorney she had researched so carefully was going to cost her significantly more than she had budgeted. The final hearing was almost anticlimactic. The judge reviewed our comprehensive documentation, noted the evidence of financial misconduct, and approved the settlement without question. What should have been a contentious battle lasting months was resolved in a single session. As we left the courthouse, her attorney approached mine with an unusual request. He wanted copies of our documentation methods for future reference. Apparently, he had never seen a case where someone had so thoroughly prepared for a spouse's deception. "Your client played this perfectly," he told my attorney. "I've never seen someone turn the tables so completely." That evening, I returned to collect my belongings from what had been our home. She was there, sitting in the same chair where she had tried to ambush me weeks earlier. The house felt different now, like a place where someone else had lived. "I underestimated you," she said quietly as I packed my things. I looked at her for a moment, this woman who had shared my life and then systematically planned to destroy it. "You didn't underestimate me. You never knew me at all." She tried to explain herself, to justify her actions. But I wasn't interested in her reasons anymore. The woman I had married was either gone or had never existed in the first place. "The house is yours," I said, closing the last box, along with the mortgage payments, the utility bills, and the maintenance costs you forgot to factor into your research. As I loaded my car, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not just from ending a marriage built on deception, but from discovering exactly what I was capable of when pushed to defend myself. The game was over. And while there were no real winners in divorce, there was definitely a clear loser, and it wasn't me. 3 months later, I stood in the driveway of my new house, watching the moving truck pull away with the last of my belongings. Not an apartment like she had probably expected, but a house I had purchased with the money she never knew existed, money I had earned and saved legitimately. While she was busy planning my financial destruction, the irony was beautiful. While she was researching how to take everything I had, I was discovering assets I had forgotten about, retirement accounts from previous jobs, investments my father had helped me set up years ago, and savings bonds I had purchased and stored away. Her forensic accountant never would have found them because they weren't hidden, they were just mine. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney. The final paperwork had been processed, and I was officially free. More importantly, the financial investigation she had triggered had revealed something interesting about her own finances. Apparently, the money she had been transferring wasn't just from our joint account. It was also from credit cards she had opened in both our names without my knowledge. The credit card companies were very interested in this information, especially since the purchases included expensive jewelry and luxury items that had mysteriously disappeared before our asset division. Her plan to hide assets had backfired spectacularly when investigators found her safe deposit box, filled with items purchased with fraudulent credit. I walked through my new home, a place that was entirely mine, free from the deception and manipulation that had poisoned our shared space. Every room represented a fresh start. Every decision was mine alone to make. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. My neighbor stopped by to introduce himself, a retired gentleman who had noticed me moving in. As we talked on the front porch, he mentioned that he had gone through a similar situation years ago. "The hardest part isn't the divorce," he said. "It's realizing you were married to someone you never really knew." He was right. The woman who had shared my bed for years while secretly planning my destruction was a stranger. The real tragedy wasn't losing my marriage. It was discovering it had never been real in the first place. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call from her sister, someone I had genuinely liked during our marriage. She had heard about the divorce and wanted to apologize for her sister's behavior. "She tried to get me to lie for her during the proceedings," she explained. "She wanted me to say you were controlling with money and emotionally distant. I told her attorney exactly what I told you, that you were always generous and treated her better than she deserved." The conversation revealed just how extensive her deception had been. She had tried to recruit friends and family members to support false narratives about our marriage. When most of them refused, she had become increasingly isolated and desperate. "She's having to sell the house," her sister continued. "The mortgage payments were too much, and she couldn't afford the legal fees. She's moving back in with our parents." I felt no satisfaction in hearing about her financial struggles. If anything, I felt sorry for someone who had destroyed their own life through greed and deception. But I felt no guilt either. These were the consequences of her own choices. The final vindication came when I received a letter from the State Bar Association. Her aggressive attorney, the one she had researched so carefully, was facing disciplinary action for attempting to suborn perjury during our proceedings. Apparently, encouraging clients to make false statements was frowned upon, even in divorce court. 6 months after that Friday evening confrontation, I was living a life that was completely my own. The house was paid for with money I had legitimately saved and invested. My finances were transparent and clean. My conscience was clear. I started dating again, but this time with a much better understanding of red flags and warning signs. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about trust, verification, and the importance of really knowing someone before building a life with them. 1 year later, I ran into her at a grocery store. She looked older, tired, and seemed to be struggling with basic purchases. When she saw me, she started to approach, perhaps to apologize or explain, but then stopped herself. I nodded politely and continued with my shopping. There was nothing left to say between us. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. The difference was that my choices had been honest, strategic, and ultimately successful. As I loaded my groceries into my car, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed itself. She had researched how to get everything in divorce, but I had gotten everything that truly mattered: my integrity, my financial security, my peace of mind, and my freedom. Her search history had been about taking, mine had been about protecting. The results spoke for themselves, driving home to my house, to my life, to my future. I realized that sometimes the best defense really is a good offense. And sometimes the student becomes the master by simply being more patient, more thorough, and more honest than the teacher ever was. The game was over. I had won by refusing to play by her rules. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.